On Friday night, just 3 days ago, I eased my car into the parking lot of Toby's Bar and Grill at around 7:30 p.m. The fatigue from the past 2 days in the Big Apple weighed heavily on me as I had been finalizing negotiations with a prominent international bank. The bustling city had left me drained, and the prospect of unwinding at Toby's was a welcome relief. When the day dawned, I was filled with doubt, convinced that reaching a deal was a distant dream. Yet, as the Friday meeting unfolded, it was as if the outstanding obstacles began to tumble away like a chain of dominoes, each one falling with surprising ease and precision. By the time noon rolled around, only 2 stubborn sticking points remained. We decided it was best to take a break and head out for lunch separately to clear our minds. I wandered into a nearby Jewish deli that exuded the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and smoked meats. There, I indulged in an indulgently large pastrami and Swiss on rye. The sandwich was a masterpiece. Each bite was a perfect meld of flavors that I savored with complete satisfaction. When we reconvened at 1:30, George Willis, the lead negotiator from the bank, said, "We've made a ton of progress. I propose we split the difference on the last 2 points." George passed a paper across the conference table, and I read what he was proposing. It most definitely wasn't splitting the difference, but was easily within the bounds of what my partners and I would accept to win this large contract. I scratched my initials on the page, and George said that he'd email a formal contract to me on Monday. After shaking hands, we all went in different directions. I went back to my hotel, packed, and checked out. I considered staying in the city for the night because my fiancée Trish was away for the weekend with her 2 older sisters. They were staying at one of Connecticut's giant Indian casinos. They planned to spend their days at the pool and spa and their evenings in the finer bars and restaurants. Instead of another night away from home, I headed to Grand Central Station and caught the Metro North train to New Haven. By 7:30, I had driven up I-91 toward Hartford and exited the highway. I was heading through the always popular downtown West Hartford. I decided to stop for dinner. I was sitting in Toby's bar area when I spotted my 2 future sisters-in-law through the bar mirror, sliding into a horseshoe-shaped table. Their husbands slid in next to them. The immediate knot in my stomach and pain that seemed to spread over every inch of my body told me that my wedding plans, exactly 8 weeks away, were in trouble. My sister-in-law should have been at the casino with Trish. After catching the bartender's eye, I said to Michael, "I need to go outside for a while. I promise I'll be back." "No problem, Chris. Do you mind if I put your drink on the shelf and open up this spot?" Michael asked as he reached for my glass. I nodded in agreement and left Toby's. I sat in my car, in the back of the parking lot, and I sketched out in my head what I needed to do. I called Trish and she answered, "Hey, love, how is the big city?" "It's the same as always. We finished up a successful negotiation and I'm heading out for dinner. I wish you were with me." "You're so sweet, Chris. I miss you too. We've had a ball all day. We lounged at the pool and sipped drinks. I have a nice head start on my wedding tan. I'm meeting my sisters in a few minutes for dinner." Trish and I talked for a bit more before exchanging "I love you" and ending the call. I checked the Find My Phone app and punched in Trish's information. I'm not sure where Trish was, but her phone was in Falmouth, Massachusetts, on the western end of Cape Cod. Damn, I thought. Trish's longtime neighbor and friend, Nick Flaherty, had a family home in Falmouth. We'd been invited there a number of times. Looking through my contact information, I found Sue Flaherty's cell phone number. I called, and after Sue answered, I said, "Hi, Sue. It's Chris Harrington." "Chris? Chris Harrington? What a nice surprise. How are the wedding plans coming along? Nick and I can't wait to be there." I responded, "To be honest, I'm not sure how the plans are coming." Sue laughed and said, "That's a typical male response." "Hey, Sue," I asked, "what are the chances that Nick is traveling this weekend?" What an odd question. Nick hardly ever has to travel over a weekend, but he is away this weekend. "What's this about?" Sue asked, with a little concern in her voice. Before I answer, let me ask you, do you have a Find Your Phone app on your phone? Sue let out an involuntary sob, and in a near whisper she said, "Not again." A minute later she continued, "He's supposed to be in Philadelphia, but the tracker shows that he's at his family's cottage." With a sad sigh, I said, "I'm sorry, Sue. Nick and Trish are together." Sue quietly cried for a number of minutes. "This isn't the first time," she admitted. "I'm going to call the jerk and tell him not to come home." "Can I ask you a favor, Sue?" When she didn't answer, I continued. "Trish isn't due home until Sunday afternoon." "It's the same with Nick." I asked. "Let's put off our confrontation until tomorrow night. In the meantime, I'm going to change the locks on my condominium door and take half the wedding money from a shared joint account. I'll be able to pack all her clothes and other personal items and put the bags in the driveway." "You're right, Chris. I'll do the same thing. Please text or call if you need someone to talk to. I'm sorry I had to call you." Sue was crying again and between sobs said, "It's not your fault, Chris." My last call was to Billy Jones, a friend and neighbor. He answered, "What's up, Topher?" "I need some help, Billy. Are you around tomorrow morning?" "My only plans are to sleep until noon, but Sally will have me up at 7. What can I do for you?" "Is there a chance that you can change the lock on my front door and the door coming in from the garage? And if you could change the code on the garage door opener, I'd appreciate it." There was a moment of silence before Billy said, "Mother Flipper! Is the wedding off? Unless I'm missing something big, Trish and I are dead and buried." "You got it, Topher. I'll head to Lowe's first thing in the morning and have everything changed by late morning. Does that work?" "You bet it does, Billy. Thanks." Feeling 20 years older, I trudged back into Toby's and walked to the bar. I was looking through the mirror at a reflection of my sisters-in-law and their husbands as Michael handed me back my bourbon. Their appetizers were being cleared by the server. I grabbed a bar stool and with my drink, I headed to my ex-future family's table. Michael called out, "Hey, Chris, you can't take the stool from the—" My furious stare cut Michael short. When I plopped the stool at the end of the table, climbed into the seat and angrily looked back and forth between Julie and Karen, the atmosphere got chilly, very quickly. "Chris, buddy, slide into the booth. We'll get you a menu," said Karen's husband, Steve. Without taking my eyes off the woman, I responded, "No thanks, Steve. I won't be staying long." I continued to silently glare at Julie and Karen until Julie's husband, Roy, asked, "What's going on, Chris's?" "Ask your wife, Roy." Roy and Steve turned toward their wives. It was easy to see that both women were scared to death. "What's going on?" Steve asked the sisters. Karen was the first to speak when she said, "It's not what you think, Chris." The thick tension grew as I looked across the table toward Karen. "I'm guessing it's exactly what I think," I told the group. Steve and Roy were looking back and forth between their wives at one end of the table and me at the other. When tears started streaming down Karen's face, Steve demanded, "What's going on, Chris?" "Your wives are covering for Trish. They were all together in my kitchen last Tuesday. Since I was going to be out of town until Sunday, they were going to Foxwoods Casino for a getaway weekend." "Where is Trish?" Roy asked the sisters. When they remained silent, he turned and looked at me. "She's at Nick's Cape Cod house." "Is that true?" Steve hissed. Both women were crying at this point. Karen nodded her agreement. Julie blubbered, "Trish loves you, Chris." "She really does." Steve rolled his eyes and Roy glared at the tabletop. "She has a great way of showing her love. She and her sisters lie to me and she goes off with an old neighborhood crush for a love fest weekend, just 8 weeks before she marries me. Your sister is a disgrace." "Don't you dare." Roy interrupted his wife and said, "Shut the hell up, Julie." Turning to me, he asked, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to cancel the wedding." Both friends leaned back in the booth. Their wives cried even harder. "Dad has spent so much money on the wedding and reception," said Karen. "I don't care. I'm not going to marry a lying, cheating woman like Trish. I waited a few moments before I told the group, I've told Sue Flaherty that Nick is cheating with Trish. We'd both would like 24 hours before we crush them. 4 sets of eyes were looking at me when I asked Roy and Steve, I need your help. Can you make sure? My head jerked toward their wives. Can you make sure they don't contact Trish until 6:15 p.m. tomorrow night? Both women started to protest before Steve said, We sure can, buddy. And then turning to his wife, he said, I'm disgusted with you. I have to wonder if your sisters have ever covered for you while you cheated on me. Karen was stunned as Steve continued, If you or Julie contact Trish in any way, I'll consider filing for divorce. Roy's face was bright red in anger. His response brought a sad groan from Julie when he said, After the troubles we had at the start of our 3rd year together, I might file for divorce either way. But understand, I'll definitely file if you contact Trish. I shook both men's hands and left the restaurant. Saturday was busy. It took me several hours to remove the last evidence of Trish from our home. Instead of piling the filled garbage bags in the driveway, I rented a small storage unit and my neighbor Billy loaned me his pickup. It only took 3 trips to get all of the bags off my property. The most difficult part of the day was writing an email to our wedding guests. I worked on the email in bits and pieces throughout the day. It read, Subject, Harrington and Clark Wedding Update. Dear friends, I am currently halfway through a spectacular weekend, just 8 short weeks before my wedding day, to Trish Clark. The weekend was spectacular because I discovered that Trish had spent her weekend in another man's bed. Trish and her longtime neighbor Nick Flaherty lied to me and Nick's wife Sue. With the help of Trish's sisters, Karen and Julie, and their lies, the couple is spending this weekend together on Cape Cod. You might wonder why I think this awful behavior is spectacular. The reason is simple. I'm not married to Trish. It's much easier to cancel a wedding than to go through the agony of a divorce. This email is my official notice that I am canceling my wedding to Trish Clark. Sincerely, Christopher Harrington. I called Sue Flaherty at 5:30 on Saturday afternoon. Together, we filled in each other on the tasks that we were able to complete. Because Sue was married, her separation from Nick would be much more difficult. She was able to talk with an attorney on Saturday morning and had an appointment scheduled for Monday morning. The attorney had recommended canceling joint credit cards and, as much as possible, separating the family finances. It was typical legal advice in the case of divorce. We finished our call a few minutes before 6 p.m., and we agreed to send our spouses a text at exactly 6. My text simply said, I hope you are enjoying your weekend with Nick. Thank you for showing me and the world that you are a liar and a cheat. Our wedding is canceled. I sent the text at exactly 6 p.m. A moment later, I sent the email to our family and guests. 16 months later, I stood at the edge of the altar. My best man and groomsmen were flanking me to the left. The maid of honor and bridesmaids had each processed down the center aisle of the church, each looking as stunning as the last. Tears came to my eyes as I looked toward the back of the church. Trish's father stood proud, dressed in his black tuxedo. His eyes, like mine and the rest of our guests, were locked onto the most beautiful bride ever. Her blonde hair was styled and looked beautiful under the small white veil. Her blue eyes sparkled and were filled with love, and her deep red lips gave me wicked thoughts of our upcoming wedding night. The form-fitting white wedding dress highlighted her heavenly figure, without making her look beautiful. It was perfect. As Mr. Clark and my bride started down the aisle toward me, I felt a pair of eyes drilling a hole through me. I scanned the guests on my side of the church before glancing at the bride's side. That's when I saw Trish. She had tears cascading down her cheek. I saw her silently say, "I'm sorry," before she turned toward her father and youngest sister walking toward me. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Our friends in blue turned up at the garage I owned in the form of 2 officers in a patrol car. I watched them surreptitiously from my position under the hoist. It was unusual to see such happy-looking policemen. Their expressions turned more serious as they approached me. They confirmed my identity and said they'd some bad news for me. Something had happened to my wife at our house and she was in hospital, but they couldn't go into details. I tried to leave straight away, but they stopped me, wanting a few answers. "Can you account for your whereabouts for the last 3 hours, sir?" "Yes, officer. I have been here all day. Just ask my 2 mechanics. Sorry, I did slip off for 10 minutes around 11 a.m. to get us coffees." One of the policemen wandered over to talk to Mike and Pete. The other wrote down details of which coffee shop I'd been to. "Can you show me your car, sir?" he asked. "Sure, my truck is outside." I led him outside to my pride and joy. The thorough bastard scoured the interior, then popped the hood and felt the engine. Stone cold. "Right, that's all, sir. You can go to the hospital now." There was a look of concern on my face while the staffer at the hospital explained the extent of Kate's injuries, the fact she'd received a blood transfusion, and then informed me she was being operated on now. She was expected to be out of it until the next morning. I thought it was very unprofessional for the doctor to be half smiling the whole time he was talking to me. On the way out of the hospital entrance, I was intercepted by the same 2 policemen who'd been to the garage earlier. They wanted some more answers. We retired to the hospital cafeteria for some much-needed coffee. They wanted to know how my relationship with my wife was. I explained that we'd met and married relatively late in life, 8 years ago. Kate worked a lucrative career as a defense lawyer with a large local firm. She was keen to have children but had resisted my pressure until now when she was almost 40, as she wanted to establish herself in her job. They asked me why it was she was at home on a weekday. I went on to explain that Kate had quit work a month ago so she could have a break before getting pregnant, a sort of holiday before at least 10 years of domestic service. I then added in summary that I loved my wife and we were fine and looking forward to a family. They asked me if I knew a John Barton. When I replied no and asked why they'd asked, they became evasive and took their leave. I knew I could rely on my guys to lock up the garage, so I went straight home. A deep sadness began to descend upon me. At the house, a couple of forensic guys and a lone detective were nosing around. The detective introduced himself and explained what he knew. He then asked me the same questions the earlier officers did, plus one new one. "Can you explain why we found a few drops of blood in the downstairs toilet, sir?" "Sorry, no idea, detective. Now, can I ask you something?" "By all means, sir." "It's pretty obvious you aren't treating this as an accident, and also that I am being treated as a suspect. If it was foul play, can you assure me you aren't concentrating on me as a subject, but are also looking for the real perpetrator?" "You can be assured, sir, we have a few lines of inquiry. My colleague is over talking to Mrs. Barton right now." "Who is this John Barton I keep hearing about?" "I'm sorry, sir. I don't think it is appropriate for me to comment." He and the forensic guys then took off, leaving me seemingly confused. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and looked on the scene of carnage. I would have been really shocked if I was looking at it for the first time. Earlier that day, at about 10 a.m. at work, I really started to think about intimacy. Nothing unusual about that. They do say that guys think about love on average 67 times per waking hour. Let me tell you, men who have been virtually cut off by their wives for a month can at least double that. Ever since Kate quit work, our 2 to 3 times a week had dropped to practically 0. Kate was either not in the mood, missing work, and depressed, or too tired. Personally, I thought it was because her life as she knew it was almost over, and she was just plain scared. Being the considerate husband I was, I didn't want to pressure her. She would get out of her funk at her own pace. I knew my life would change after kids, but realized hers would be turned upside down. I continued daydreaming about how our love life had been in the first few years of our marriage. Anywhere, anytime, anyhow. We'd made the effort to keep it fresh and new for as long as our imaginations lasted, then slowly lapsed into the automatic mode two long-term partners often slip into. I snapped out of my torpor. I knew what to do. Bring back the spontaneity. Go home right now and surprise Kate with passion. Right? Decision made. Time to clean up and get home. I told Mick and Pete I was heading out for a while. Pete asked if I could take the car he'd just finished servicing for a test drive. No worries. Arriving home, I was disappointed to see a car I didn't recognize in the driveway. Bugger, a friend visiting, scuppered my plans. I decided to go in anyway. Maybe the friend could be encouraged to leave and my plans could be salvaged. With no suspicions or attempts at stealth, I opened the front door. Immediately my hackles rose and I knew my marriage was over. The obvious sounds of enthusiastic activity were literally booming down the stairs. It was almost a reflex action to take out my phone and start recording video. Whenever a customer delivered a car to the garage, I always made a quick video log so we couldn't be accused of scratching it. With my heart racing, I sprinted up the steps and with video at the ready, looked in the master bedroom door. Yes, it was Kate. And yes, it was some guy I didn't recognize with her on our bed. Fighting every instinct I possessed to pounce and kill, I turned away. I can truthfully say it was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. With legs no longer able to support my weight, I slumped down on the floor just outside the door. Utterly devastated, I was only vaguely aware of the dual sounds of them reaching their peaks just around the corner. I don't know how long I was there, but gradually became aware that all sounds of their adultery had ceased, and there was only talking happening. That was just as bad, and still rankled my soul to its core. I instinctively knew that I must get out of earshot so I could gain the time to process. I was fully aware that all input to the brain goes straight to the emotion center before going to the logic part of the brain for processing. I also instinctively knew that any reaction of mine based on emotion would end up with at least him in hospital and me in prison. I needed time to think. Quietly, I got up off the floor, tiptoed downstairs, and collapsed onto the couch. I knew that if they came downstairs soon, I wouldn't be capable of controlling my actions, but my legs just wouldn't take me any further. Frankly, I was in an emotional crisis. I couldn't have been more overwhelmed. Away from the sights, smells, and most of the sounds of betrayal, I was freed from emotional distractions. I did what I knew I did best and came up with a plan. It was blatantly copied from the coalition's invasion of Iraq in the Second Gulf War. Shock and awe. Strike with such speed and ferocity that all reactions were stupefied. Drag him from the room and out of her sight. Beat the hell out of him somewhere it wouldn't bruise too much. The stomach should be just right. Then throw him naked out the back door. Return for her and throw her naked out the front door. That should give them the right impression and leave me with my liberty assured. With no bruising and no witness, hopefully, I would avoid the law. Luckily, I had the perfect shock and awe weapon in my workshop. 2 years ago, I'd been in the Army Reserve, National Guard, where, due to my mechanical skills, I'd been made an infantryman. Yeah, logical, right? After one weekend exercise, I'd been detailed to clean out the trucks we'd returned to base in. That's where I found an itty-bitty device that was going to come in handy now. The police call them stun grenades. Special forces call them flashbangs. Slightly larger than a normal grenade, they are basically a small canister with a lever and pin mechanism for ignition. They were specifically made for hostage rescue and were designed to do little physical damage so they could be lobbed into a room full of innocents with no lasting harm. Sure, they would blow a few fingers off if you held one in your hand, but were generally harmless. What they did do, however, was go off with an 8 million candle power flash and a 170 decibel bang. The flash alone could stun a person to extreme non-function for at least 5 seconds. My devious mind, driven by newly acquired hate, quickly formed the rest of the plan. I didn't want to damage my own house, so couldn't just lob it onto the floor, plus the noise of it hitting would alert them. I didn't want that. I retrieved the device and quickly taped a short piece of rope to it, then put a loop in the end of the rope. Thus prepared, I tiptoed back upstairs. As I got closer, I realized that stealth was again unnecessary. I could plainly hear a man's groans coming from the bedroom doorway. Stopping only to pick up my phone from the floor outside the door where I'd dropped it, I glanced around the doorframe. Obviously ready for round two, the guy was standing at the foot of the bed facing the door. Kate was on her knees with her back to me. I tried desperately to disassociate what I was seeing with any emotion I was feeling, but was only partly successful. Glancing around the corner again, I confirmed that his eyes were tightly shut. Mentally rehearsing the sequence of events I'd decided on, I then took a deep breath and sprang into action. One step into the room, looped the end of the rope around a hook on the bottom of the light fitting, leaving the device hanging halfway to the floor. Pull pin, slip into pocket, out the door again, fingers firmly in ears and eyes tightly shut. Even with my precautions, the effect was awesome. I could plainly feel the shock wave and sense the bright reflected light through my eyelids. Following the plan, I leap into the room again, ready for action. This time it was my turn to be stunned. I don't know exactly what I expected to find, but it was nothing like the scene that confronted me. Mr. Anonymous was sprawled on his back on the bed, with blood absolutely fountaining from his groin. Either nature had been extremely unkind to him, or there was some of his equipment missing. Kate was flat on her back on the floor with vacant eyes, and her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, face covered in blood. Confused, I retreated out into the hall again to think. My reverie was disturbed shortly afterward by twin unholy shrieks from the bedroom, followed by various thumps and doors slamming open. I was starting to realize that I was in deep trouble. My plan had gone badly right. Sorry, I meant wrong there. I looked around the doorframe once more into the scene of carnage. The guy had rolled off the bed and was curled up on the floor holding his groin, still shrieking like a banshee. Do you know how many nerves there are in a penis? Kate was nowhere in sight, but there was a blood trail leading to the bathroom. Must remove evidence. I re-entered the room, scanned it, and quickly found the detonator mechanism from the device, adding it to the rope in my pocket. I couldn't find anything else, so concluded it must all have been consumed. I started towards the bathroom, being very careful not to step in any blood, which was a big ask, I can tell you. Kate was on her knees, spewing into the toilet. I fought the urge to go and help her. I just didn't care anymore. On the way out of the door, I spotted something amongst the blood on the floor. I picked it up. It was warm and squishy, and about 3.5 inches long. On the way out the front door, I detoured to the downstairs toilet and flushed it away. They wouldn't be sewing that back on. Careful not to screech my tires, I sped off down the street, thankful once again that we lived so far from the neighbors' houses. Halfway back to the garage, I dumped my pockets into a roadside bin. 10 minutes later, I was back in the small garage that I called work. I called over Pete and Mike, the two grubby, oil-stained guys I call my employees and friends. They hurried over, seeing I was rattled. Guys, I need you to be my alibi for the last 45 minutes. What do you say? Sure, boss, came almost simultaneously from them. Well, before you agree so hastily, I'd better tell you that what I have done is pretty bloody serious, and once I tell you what it is, you may not be so quick to answer. I don't know what the hell I will be charged with, but it could mean prison time. Before I explained it to them, I went to my office and threw on an old, dirty set of coveralls. I then went over to the bin and grabbed an oily rag, rubbing it into my face and arms. I didn't know when the police would be here, but I fully expected them. Both guys looked at me a bit bemused. I gave them a quick rundown on events of the last little while. They looked at me with stunned expressions. Mike was the first to break. He tried to hold it in for a good 15 seconds, then erupted in laughter. That broke the ice for Pete, who shortly joined Mike and me in uncontrollable hooting. Mine was driven by the aftermath of an adrenaline rush. It was fully 5 minutes before we all regained control, and with handshakes and promises of support, they returned to their oily engine bays. For the next hour, spontaneous chuckles could be heard from inside various grimy spaces. My wife, Kate, was about to reap the reward she'd earned for being aloof with my lowly friends in the past. Do you know how hard it is to clean blood up? Bastard stuff sticks like poop to a blanket. I ended up only cleaning the bathroom floor that night. I decided to just throw the bed linen away and made a note to get a new carpet for the bedroom. The ripped curtains would have to go as well. I tried to keep busy, avoiding thinking. That process wasn't helped by the constant phone ringing and knocking at the door. Yes, the media were in feeding frenzy mode. The combination of adultery and a guy getting his manhood bitten off was a story sent from heaven for them. I only answered the door once and soon unplugged the phone. Finally, with nothing left to distract me, I got around to my soul-searching. Did I regret what I'd done? Strangely, no. I hated cheaters with a passion. I'd seen too many guys turned into woman-hating recluses when they caught their partners out. The funny thing was that until before lunchtime today, I would have bet my life on my wife sharing that passion. I was still stunned that I'd been so wrong, not to mention utterly bemused at Kate's motivation. She seemed to be as devoted to me as I was to her, and our love life was just fine. Well, until recently that was. After hours of internal turmoil, I could only come up with one solitary clue. I recalled the hairs on the back of my neck playing up about 2 months ago when Kate announced she was resigning so she could enjoy her last days of freedom. I expected her to work until at least the 7th month of her pregnancy. Something about her statement that she wanted a last hurrah before children struck me as odd. My rumination was interrupted by my private cell phone ringing. Not many people knew the number. Caller ID showed it to be Kate's parents' number. They lived in the same state, but about 3 hours' drive away. I'd always got along with them fantastically, so I answered. After way less than the usual pleasantries, her mom cut to the chase. "Dave, what's going on? Do you know why there are a bunch of journalists besieging our house?" Well, they had to find out sometime. I just couldn't bring myself to go into detail. Mom, did you watch the local news tonight? The top story, maybe? What? The one about some unfaithful woman biting her lover's manhood off? I'd always loved her mom's colorful language and no-nonsense views on life, but hell, she wasn't making this conversation easy. Yes, Mom. Look, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll just launch straight in. The woman was Kate. Luckily, my discomfiture was cut short by a scream followed by a dial tone. As I pressed the end button on the phone, I noticed an alert on the screen. Memory full. That reminded me that I'd recorded the ending of my marriage a bare 8 hours before. I had vague memories of leaving the phone recording outside the bedroom door. I knew that if I never discovered and believed the reason why Kate had done what she did, I might never trust another woman ever again. There was a good chance I would die a lonely misogynist, doomed to a wasted life. With desperate hope, I started the video playback. The screen showed the view I saw walking along the hall to the bedroom. I closed my eyes when it peeped through the door. I already knew what it showed. The pain was just too fresh to relive that scene yet. I opened them in time for when I'd put the phone on the floor. With no visual, just a view of the hall ceiling, I had to imagine Mr. and Mrs. Adulterer lying side by side on the bed. I couldn't make out the audio clearly, so downloaded the file to my computer and ran it through an amplifier. This is the relevant part of their conversation. Wow, Kate, that was fantastic. In fact, the last week has been great. Does it have to end today? My offer still stands. Just give me the word and I'll divorce Sarah and marry you. Yeah, like that will work. Great start to a marriage hooking up with a guy that will mess around on his wife and kids. No, I love Dave way too much to hurt him like that. Besides, he is a great husband and will make a good father. After today, I'll be Mrs. Goody-Goody's housewife. At least until the youngest of our kids goes to school. You can't love him that much. It's not him lying here with you? He questioned. No, you're wrong. I do love him dearly. The moment I met him, I knew he was my one and only soulmate. I'll never meet another. We are so in tune, physically, that he can take me places no one else ever has. I feel blessed that I have such a good man to spoil me and nurse me when I get a big belly from his 2 or 3 babies. No, I want nothing more than to die in his arms surrounded by our grandchildren. Well, that was a fine speech, counselor, but one that begs the obvious question. Why are you cheating on him? He questioned. At least Kate had the humanity to give this some thought. There was a good half a minute of silence. I guess I just miss being single. I didn't get married until I was 31 and was a bit of a wild girl. I miss just going into a bar and getting hit on by a variety of guys. The thrill of leading a guy on and then deciding on impulse if he's going to score or not. Every second weekend lately, Dave has been going deer shooting with his buddies. 3 weekends ago, I decided to go for a trip down memory lane and hit a bar. That led to a one-night stand, which was kinda all right but unsatisfying. Then last Saturday, I happened to go to the bar where you were, and so here we are. Christ, that's cold, Kate, he replied. Just think of it as the last hurrah. Anyway, what are you complaining about? Come here, I said it had to end today. I didn't say it had to end right now. I turned off the audio. I knew there would be no more intelligent conversation. At least now I knew I was a good lover and husband. The problem wasn't me. The next days were an anticlimax. After 2 days, the reporters demobbed and left my quiet street. I did get a phone call from a hospital administrator passing on a message that Kate would like some of her pajamas. I passed on that one. She could put up with those humiliating hospital-issue gowns. 2 days later, her father rang me. He apologized for his daughter's behavior and hoped I would stay in touch. To try to sweeten the deal, he reminded me that he did have another daughter and she was recently divorced. Sorry, Dad, just too weird. 4 days after the event, it was back on the news again. He was released from the hospital. The journos had done some digging and exposed him as a serial cheater. Thus, they took some delight in announcing that although the surgeons managed to sew his manhood back on, it was very unlikely that it would achieve at least one of its designed functions. At the end of that week, I received a surprise visitor. Mrs. Barton, or Sarah, as she insisted I called her, was a fine-looking lady with sad eyes. She told me that she'd heard a rumor that I may have some evidence that may help her in her divorce case. I explained that maybe I did, but couldn't admit to it without incriminating myself. She understood and was very apologetic for asking. I told her I thought there was such a glut of circumstantial evidence that she wouldn't need what I had. If that proved wrong, then I urged her to come back and I might reconsider. She had such sadness about her that I took pity. Pulling the video file up, I played her just the aftermath of the Big Bang. The shock at her husband's screams made her cringe initially, but she soon rallied. Suffice it to say, when she left, the sadness was gone. Being the helpful guy I am, I invited her to come over whenever the sadness returned for a pick-me-up. Oh yes, that wasn't the last time I would be seeing Sarah Barton. The last visitor I received was probably the strangest. On Saturday, I answered the door to the detective that I'd talked to at the house on the day of the big event. Gone was the suit, just jeans and shirt. Hi, son. No, I won't come in. I just wanted to say that with insufficient evidence, I have recommended the case be closed. At my thanks, he turned to walk away, then paused and looked back. Look, I'll be retiring at the end of the year. If I come back after that, would you tell me how you did it? I just smiled and bid him a good day. The letter from Kate arrived the following Tuesday. My dearest Dave, I cannot tell you how ashamed and sorry I am for what I did to you. I fully understand why you haven't been able to bring yourself to visit me, and I forgive you without reservation. I never thought of the full extent of possible repercussions for my actions. I certainly never knew my parents would virtually disown me over the phone. I know that I have forever lost your love, trust, and respect, which hurts me more than I can possibly describe. I understand if you don't ever want to speak to me again, but it may help your recovery if you allow me to explain why I did what I did. Just be assured it was all my fault. It's your choice. You know where I will be for a while. The doctors say I won't be able to speak properly for a long time, if ever. They think I swallowed the tip of my tongue when I bit it off. They are telling me about some experimental stretching techniques that may restore some function. I hope it works, so I can at least return to my career as some distraction from the dreary, loveless, childless future I now face. Ask for anything you like in the divorce, and I will sign it. If you could find it in your heart to keep me on your medical insurance for the near future, I would be eternally grateful. Goodbye, my love. I wish you nothing but happiness in the future. I hope I haven't totally wrecked yours as well. Yours, Kate. I must say, the letter moved me. So much so that I immediately decided to reverse a previous decision. I thought long and hard. Dang it. I would drop her pajamas off at the hospital. Now where are Mick and Pete's phone numbers? I owe them a beer. A keg each should do it. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.